Good morning, everyone. To introduce myself, I'm Chris Lazat, an independent scholar. My research focuses on the relationship between women and cars in a variety of contexts. This presentation, From Powder Puff to W Series, traces the complicated history of women-only racing in Europe and the United States. In 2019, I was asked to contribute a chapter on the rather broad topic of women in motorsports to be included in a compiled volume on the history and politics of motor racing. At the time, the W Series, an all-female single-seater racing championship, had just been introduced. This announcement created a fair amount of controversy in the racing community. W Series proponents praised the racing championship as an important platform for women to showcase racing ability, as well for its potential to carve a pathway to higher-level racing. Opponents decried the series as aggressive and belittling to women, claiming segregated racing carries the implication women aren't capable of competing at the same level as men. The question of whether female racers are best served by separate or equal opportunities has long been a subject of discussion and unwavering opinion. Thus, I thought an examination into the history of women-only racing could perhaps provide some insight into the ongoing debate. This presentation is taken from the chapter that was eventually published in 2023. Although the W Series was suspended in 2022 due to financial issues, the question of how to best advance women in motorsport remains relevant today. Women's interest in motorsport began shortly after the automobile's introduction. In the early auto age in both Europe and the United States, the horseless carriage was accessible primarily to those with considerable financial means. Although the association of the automobile and masculinity has been accepted as a given throughout automotive history, at the turn of the 20th century, it was wealth and status rather than gender that determined who could operate a motor vehicle. Thus, it was not unusual for well-off women to join men as driving enthusiasts. The permission awarded to early women drivers allowed them to call upon the automobile to expand social, physical, and political horizons. Female motorists of significant means were, in fact, the first to engage in cross-country automobile trips. While these tours often served as auto company publicity stunts, they also effectively presented women on the national stage as legitimate motorists. Yet for some women, long-distance tours were not enough. To satisfy a newfound passion for driving, they turned to racing. By the early 1900s, informal and formal racing events were being held in Europe and the United States in a variety of venues. On both sides of the Atlantic, upper-class women gained notoriety, if not success, as female racers. Camille Dugas of France was recognized as the first female star of motorsports. Through her impressive racing accomplishments, Britain's Dorothy Levitt earned the right to call herself the fastest woman on Earth. Joan Newton Cuneo went on to become perhaps the most well-known female motorist in the U.S. until abruptly shut down in 1909 by the American Automobile Association, when women were officially forbidden to participate in the organization's motorsport events. The situation differed in Europe, however. Motor racing at Brooklands was beginning to draw large crowds. Eyeing a potential for profit, race authorities relented and allowed women onto the track, albeit in special event women-only races. Taking over the motor racing circuit after her husband's death in 1926, Ethel Locke King created new opportunities for women. Organizations such as the Ladies Automobile Club at Brooklands and the Automobile Club Féminin de France became important networks for the development and promotion of female racers. In these European venues, women had the opportunity to demonstrate they could race as competitively as men. World War II altered the possibilities for female racers in both Europe and the United States in conflicting ways. In Britain, the post-war period witnessed a change in attitudes regarding female racers. New personnel at Brooklands, the retirement of former female racers, and increased emphasis on the dangers of the sport contributed to the return of traditional opinions opposing women drivers' involvement in motor racing. The prevailing mood was no longer conducive to women on the track. Public spirit required that every woman look after her war veteran and produce children. In post-war America, however, women, nearly invisible on the track since the AAA ban, were the beneficiaries of new motorsport opportunities. Motorsport, which had long existed as an activity for the rich, soon became accessible to those of lesser means. These amateur competitions became fan favorites, as anyone with a vehicle and a bit of daring could participate. Women who accompanied boyfriends or husbands to the racetrack were soon offered the opportunity to compete in separate ladies' races, most often referred to as powder puff. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, powder puff races were created to address a number of concerns. Women who accompanied male racers had little to do once arriving but watch and wait. In the masculine world of motorsports, women served primarily as uniform washers, picnic lunch makers, and cheerleaders. Confined to the sidelines, female interest in the race experience soon began to wane. Race promoters, fearful women's lack of enthusiasm would keep boyfriends and husbands from entering events, saw an opportunity to keep women occupied and in the process increase the gate. Girlfriends and wives were encouraged to borrow cars from male companions and race against each other as a special attraction. Powder puff participants often had limited driving experience, but were encouraged to take part to show support for a male companion's motorsports hobby. While many women participated tentatively, there were some dissatisfied with roles as tag-alongs who desired to race competitively. But because most tracks prohibited women from racing against men, powder puff competitions became the primary way to develop confidence behind the wheel, gain track experience, hone racing skills and strategies, and show the guys that they could do it too. On most tracks, powder puff races were often more spectacle than serious competition. As an auto journalist recalls, the women also had to participate in a gong show type agenda. They might have to run so many laps, stop to eat a piece of watermelon, run up into the stands and kiss the man of their choice, then resume the race, or stop after so many laps to wrestle with a greased pig. As another noted, powder puff were the type of events in which women were treated as less significant and where the men would kindly lend their race cars to women for just a few laps around the track. Clearly, women competitors were not taken very seriously. Yet despite the negative attitudes toward women racers, participation in powder puff often had a positive and powerful effect on women's lives. Women raced not only to support male companions, but also to expand social networks, gain confidence, and escape from everyday lives. Powder puff provided women with the opportunity to develop advanced driving skills, make important contacts, gain a little notoriety, and prove themselves as serious racers. Many, including those featured here, who went on to achieve a number of firsts in women's motorsport, began racing careers in powder puff. Other than premier events such as the Indianapolis 500 and NASCAR Championship, American post-war racing was primarily an amateur pastime. Races were run for trophies. Cash prizes were banned, as were donations from sponsors, car makers, or local businesses. While the conditions under which men and women raced were not the same, women received less track time and had fewer and shorter races than male counterparts, all racers were held to the same restrictions in terms of sponsorships and financial remuneration. As the decade concluded, top drivers from the sports car circuit were being lured by the considerable cash prizes of international competition. U.S. racing organizations fought back by creating racing events with comparable financial awards. Smaller venues, losing top drivers and paying crowds, sought sponsors to stay in business. While the move toward the commercialization of motorsports affected all amateur racers, regardless of gender, it was ultimately responsible for the decline of all female racing. Without amateur ladies' races, women lost an important platform from which to gain experience and exposure. While ladies' races were often the subject of derision and disparagement, they were without question instrumental in bringing the racing experience to an increasing population of female motorsport enthusiasts. As the professionalism of racing resulted in reduced possibilities for female racers, women's racing teams emerged as one of the few opportunities to fill the void. During the 1970s, two racing organizations in Europe and the United States developed all-female racing teams. While the primary motivation was the marketing and promotional potential of photogenic female racers, the very existence of these teams allowed for increased women's motorsports participation. During the early 1970s, Bob Mayret, a French dentist and former rally competitor, convinced Aseptacle, a brand of toothpaste created by his company, to sponsor a European all-female rally team. As part of Aseptacle's wide-reaching PR campaign, the team was composed of attractive women with varying degrees of driving skills, outfitted in matching pink racing ensembles that complemented the red, white, and strawberry pink racing cars. The team's first outings in 1973 were early season Alpine rally events in France and provided challenging competition as well as all-important promotional opportunities. Over the next 20 years, Team Aseptacle had varying degrees of success. Team Aseptacle inspired the formation of other all-ladies rallies teams in Europe, and while the women served primarily as marketing tools for the owner, sponsors, and race promoters, it also brought attention, both positive and negative, to individual drivers in particular and motorsport women in general. Many who spent a season or two driving for excuse me. Many who spent a season or two driving for Team Aseptacle, including those featured here, were able to fashion solid careers as rally drivers. Yet more significantly, Team Aseptacle and the all-female racing teams it inspired suggested that women in motorsports were not, in fact, exceptions to the rule, but were part of a growing population of serious and competent female racers. Oops. Around the same time in the United States, the McMillan Ring Free oil racing team sponsored a group of female racers known as the Motor Maids. The team was first assembled in 1966 to compete in the Daytona 24 Hours. Yet much like the European racing scene, the focus was on the all-female team was more promotional than professional. Publicity focused not on driving skills, but personal appearance. A 1966 press release described Motor Maid Donna Mae Mins as a bubbling, bouncing blonde bombshell of energy. Her famous Think Pink wardrobe on the track has become her trademark. News devoted to Leanne Ingeman called attention to her clothing choices. Leanne's trademarks are her white turtleneck sweaters and a purple racing outfit that emphasizes the fact that this racing driver is all girl. Emphasis on physical appearance served two purposes. First, of course, was the utilization of attractive women as a promotional device. As women were a rarity in motorsports, female racers garbed in bright pink racing apparel made them stand out. They were perceived as a novelty, eye candy for male spectators, or an exciting diversion for speed enthusiasts. Secondly, it determinedly and purposefully framed female racers as appropriately feminine. Post-war culture increasingly stereotyped female athletes as unfeminine in demeanor, managed in their appearance, and incapable of maintaining heterosexual relationships with men. Calling attention to women's sexual attractiveness implied that not only are unfeminine, code for lesbian, women absent in motorsports, but participating in motorsports will not move a woman's sexual orientation in that direction. Selecting heterosexually appealing women and outfitting them to accentuate their femininity assured spectators and participants of both genders that female race car drivers were non-threatening women who adhere to traditional female gender roles as attractive sexual partners. Yet despite the focus on personal appearance, participation as a motor maid did create opportunities for a few of its members, including Janet Guthrie, who went on to become the first woman to qualify and compete in the 1977 Daytona 500. She was also the first woman and top rookie at the Indianapolis 500 the same year. Competing as a motor maid provided its drivers with experience, exposure, and future racing possibilities they were unlikely to have received otherwise. 50 years later, in September 2020, two all-female crews, the Iron Dames and the Richard Mille Racing Team, competed in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the world's most famous endurance race. Although faced with shortened training sessions due to COVID, both teams had modestly successful runs. The Iron Dames claimed ninth place from the 22 starters in the LMGTE AM category. The Mille team finished an impressive ninth of the 24 LMP2 crews in their debut outing. The inclusion of these teams resulted in the highest female participation in the 24 hours since 10 women competed in 1935. Unlike previous all-female racing teams, promotional possibilities took a backseat to talent on the track. The teams were built around strong, experienced, and serious racers. The marketing focus was on individual and collective ability rather than on femininity or the color of the racing suits. Within the historically masculine motorsport enterprise, there is a perception that female-only teams and the drivers that inhabit them are inherently second-rate. Many competitors expressed reluctance to join the teams for that reason. However, the talent and teamwork on display at Le Mans demonstrated that with support, sponsorship, and opportunity, women could achieve success and respect in the motorsports arena. In the early 2000s, the Women's Racing Series emerged as an alternative all-female racing concept. While the all-female racing team expanded the opportunities for women's participation in high-performance racing events somewhat, women remained a significant minority. The Women's Racing Series, therefore, was created to address the lack of women in the higher echelons of motorsport by providing more openings for more women to develop the skills and experience necessary to move on to the next level. One of the earliest and more unconventional examples of this concept was Formula Women, an all-female-based motor racing championship created and marketed in association with the British media from 2004 to 2007. More than a race series, Formula Women shared many of its components with the UK's burgeoning reality television boom. The promoters did not solicit established racers. Rather, a team of 16 finalists was selected from over 10,000 applicants. Prospective drivers were subject to a series of assessments in driving skill, physical fitness, and media and public relations management. The series was also promoted as a male-free zone. As the applicant invitation read, the charm of Club Formula Women is that we operate in an entirely female environment, removing the stigma of intimidating male-dominated driving days. Formula Women drivers were initially intrigued by the prospect of participating in an all-female motor racing series. As relatively new to the racing scene, the women believed the unique experience would mold them for a possible career in the sport, and hoped the television exposure would create lucrative promotional and sponsorship possibilities. However, problems with the format, organization, and financial backing led to difficulties on and off the track. While Formula Women was created with the intent to provide increased motorsport opportunities for women, as well as to expand female interest in the sport, it ultimately failed to do either well. However, that over 10,000 applied to the Formula Women program certainly suggests a growing female interest in motorsport. And despite its inability to capture a loyal audience in its original incarnation, the Formula Women series was relaunched in post-COVID 2021. The media attention brought to the W Series has unquestionably provided an impetus for various racing organizations, including Formula Women, to encourage female interest in motorsports. The W Series was introduced in October 2018 as a unique, groundbreaking, free-to-enter single-seater motor racing series for women drivers only. The Formula 3 Championship Series was conceived to promote female drivers into Formula One. The objective was not only to produce top-notch racing for spectators and viewers on a global scale, but also to equip its drivers with the experience and expertise with which they may progress their careers. In its inaugural season, 18 drivers representing 13 countries, chosen from nearly 100 top female drivers across the globe, participated in 6 races at some of Europe's premier F1 racing venues. Those selected were required to take part in rigorous training programs centered on driving techniques, simulator exposure, technical engineering approaches, fitness, and media, conducted by instructors with Formula One experience. Efforts were taken to address the inequalities that plague many of the world's premier racing series. Drivers were not expected to attain sponsorships nor to shoulder any financial responsibility. All expenses were covered by the series organization. The 2019 series was a modest success. It experienced an increase in viewer interest and ratings after each race. By the end of the first season, the W Series was broadcast in over 50 countries, reaching up to 350 million households. At the end of the season, it was reported that in 2020, the top 8 championship drivers would collect points toward an FIA super license, an important entryway into Formula One. Despite the mostly positive press, W Series entered the racing arena under a cloud of controversy with much to prove. Not everyone, the media, racing organizations, race promoters, and the women themselves, was convinced a woman-only series was a step forward. Opponents argued since motorsports is one of the few competitions in which women can compete directly with men, female racers should take every opportunity to do so. Detractors claim that much like the all-female racing competitions that preceded it, W Series was primarily a PR move, as women's success in these venues had little influence within the masculine F1 culture. The debate surrounding the W Series echoes that which has accompanied most configurations of the female motorsport since powder puffs entered the racing arena. For much of its existence, women's racing has been constructed as a frivolous sideshow, a trivial endeavor, a catwalk of second-rate drivers in pink racing suits. Although women's racing has come into its own in the 21st century, it cannot completely escape such long-standing disparaging associations. It is not surprising, therefore, that many choose to dismiss all-female racing as a way to distance themselves from these pervasive sexist, stereotypical representations. Secondly, throughout automotive history, critics have drawn on gender stereotypes, women as emotionally unstable, physically weak, and intellectually deficient, to frame women as interior drivers. These assumed biological character deficits have carried over into motorsports, where women are considered less able to perform in a competitive field. The arguments against the W Series assume an either-or position. Only one platform, segregated or non-segregated, best serves female racers. However, the W Series framed itself as an addition to, rather than replacement for, non-segregated racing. The W Series objective was not to compete with non-segregated events for female support and participation, but rather to increase opportunities for women throughout motorsports. The COVID pandemic canceled the 2020 W Series. The 2021 season featured 8 races in support of the 2021 Formula One World Championship. The 2023 season was shortened due to financial issues, and the W Series was ultimately dissolved. Britain's Jamie Chadwick was the winner of all 3 seasons. Chadwick went on to become a development driver for the Williams Formula One team and race for Andretti Global in Indy NXT. In November 2022, Formula One announced the creation of F1 Academy, a female-only, junior-level single-seater racing series aimed to develop and prepare young drivers for higher levels of competition. Like Formula Woman and the W Series that preceded it, it was established to address the lack of female drivers in other racing series. Now in its 2nd season, the Academy has already witnessed an increase in female participation, with a 265% increase in cadet-age females qualifying for the British Karting Championships, the first step in a young woman's racing journey. In 2024, the F1 Academy Racing Series will compete across 7 countries, spanning 3 continents for the first time. Each side of the gender-segregated versus integrated racing conundrum makes a compelling case for how women in motorsports are best served. Champions of integrated racing argue women will not be considered equal in motorsport until they compete head-to-head with men. Those on the opposing side contend because women have traditionally had fewer avenues into motorsports than male peers, female racing provides an important and necessary entryway into the higher echelons of competition. There can be little question that the history of motorsports is a masculine one. Even in its earliest years, when well-connected societal women were conditionally accepted into the racing arena, traditional assumptions and biologically deterministic attitudes toward women framed motoring and motorsports as exclusive male preserves. 100 years later, the position of motorsports as a nearly impenetrable male enterprise remains. Women with an interest in racing, therefore, have had to devise particular strategies to enter what has long existed as an exclusive masculine fraternity. Without many of the connections available to male racers, rising through the ranks of karting, coming from a family of racing enthusiasts, Having an intermediary in the racing community and racing mentors, women must often rely on other methods, and one of those, as demonstrated here, is participation in women-only racing events. This examination of female-only racing over the past 75 years does not attempt to answer the question of whether or not women are best served by gender-segregated racing. Rather, it offers insight into how women have and continue to construct alternative avenues into the historically masculine and often unwelcoming motorsports arena. Through an inspection of women's engagement in female racing venues, from Powder Puff to W Series, it provides an opportunity to consider how segregated racing has both limited and empowered women's motorsports participation. Thank you for your attention. The photographs in this presentation are from the following resources. Thank you.